Hey there, I'm Crystal, and this week we're talking about New Age. So I want to know, have you ever heard New Age is evil? Have you ever heard about tarot cards or psychics or crystals? They're all evil and demonic. Have you heard that? I've heard it plenty of times. And I was always of the mindset of like, you're just being judgmental. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what this is. And, obviously the Bible talks about it being evil and demonic. My thought was always, well, maybe like back when this was written, maybe back when the Bible was written, they were using it in an evil way because there's definitely evil. You can definitely use these things for evil. But in the way that I felt like I was using them, it didn't feel that way. They significantly helped me in my life. They helped me get better and do better and be more positive and all these things. And so for me, I just didn't understand what people were talking about, and I got pretty defensive about it. But if you want to know the truth about it, if you want to know what it is that I found out, then stick around. We're going to talk about it. But I want to share a little bit of my story because I think it's pertinent to all of this and how I came to this point in my life, how I came to know the things that I know, and so I just want to share a little bit. Maybe you can see something in that. So I grew up in the Lutheran Church. We went to church every Sunday. Um, I was involved in the church. It's not like we just went to church and that was that. I went to Sunday school. We went to Vacation Bible School. I was an altar girl for way too long, I think. Yeah, I was always, coming to church and they were like frantically trying to find somebody to do the altar position. And so I was often there. I was in the choir. And then, of course, like as I got older, I helped teach Vacation Bible School. So I was a part of the church. I was very involved in the church. But at a certain point there, we got a new pastor and things were changing. And so we kind of stopped going as a family to church. And of course, we never really talked about God outside of church. It was not really a thing that we did. We didn't discuss anything. It was just kind of like church, and God is on Sunday. And so it was kind of one of those things that I just did. Like I was a good kid. I followed the rules. I did what I was supposed to. And so I was just kind of going through the motions of being a good kid and doing what I was supposed to. I don't know if I ever really believed. It was just, knowledge to know. It's like school, it's just like another aspect of school. And so when we stopped going, I kind of like didn't really do anything with that. And then, as I'm growing and I'm more in the sciences and the math classes, and, I excelled at those. And so I became very, very left brain and very logical. And I didn't believe, I got to a point where I didn't believe in God. I thought it was a nice thought. It would be a nice like notion to have God, but that it wasn't logical. There didn't make sense. And so, I just didn't believe. Um, and so that's kind of, how I lived most of my years, most of my years growing up and through adulthood, until I went to chiropractic school. And I, was going through, this was the first time I was really having a lot of like human anatomy classes and things like that. And so I had my embryology class and we had to learn like the process of, fertilization, all the things. And it just kind of struck me as, wow, like this is such an involved process. The things, all of the little things that have to come into perfect alignment in order to create human life is insane. There are so many steps. And if you know anything about statistics, the more steps you create, the more precise things have to be, the more haywire it's likely to go. And so the fact that over and over and over again, life is formed through this process, it's almost miraculous that it even happens at all, you know? And so while that wasn't what brought me to God at all, it kind of stuck with me, and it created like this crack in my, I don't believe in God armor. There was just like that small crack. And I think that's, looking back, what um, maybe God used to kind of break through, that all he needed was that just little like phase of doubt, that little like notion of doubt, that little crack in the armor to break through. And I think that's probably where things started to maybe like open up, that okay, the possibility, right? And so I didn't really think much about it at that time, but I would say that's kind of maybe the beginning point. And so, as I was going through school, there's various chiropractic techniques. One of them is like I can't remember what it's called, what the technique is, but it's kind of like energy healing in a sense. And so I had the option of taking that class, and I did, and because I wanted to know everything I could know. And so that also kind of started opening my mind to like more things, right? More than just the physical, because energy is science, and I could see scientifically how these things could work. And so it kind of put a little dent in the armor, if you will. So then I would say after chiropractic school, I was working, I was doing all these things, and some stuff, life happened. And I found myself in a place where I did not like where I had come to. I had just kind of been doing like one step after another, and I didn't really like the life that I had built for myself. I was absolutely miserable. And I just, some things happened, and I was pretty much at rock bottom at that point. And I was so depressed, and I couldn't keep myself from crying like every single day. I was at my rock bottom. And I started watching The Secret. Just by happenstance, I started watching The Secret, and I was like, oh, like I've never heard this before. I started to put that into practice, like the gratitude and thinking positively and thinking about things that I want, and, really manifesting, right? And as I was kind of learning more and more, because I'm one of those people, I love to learn, and if I have questions, like I love digging in and like trying to figure stuff out and find the information, and reading, I love to read. And so I was kind of trying to get my hands on everything. And so I was going through personal development books, and, spiritual new age books, and like just all the things, and finding anything that could help me do better. And I was at a place where I was able to pull myself out of this like miserable existence and actually kind of survive, I was doing all of these things, and I had come to the place where um, I knew there was a God for sure. I for sure knew there was a God, because there's just no way that all of this exists without intelligent design. It's just impossible. And so scientifically, I was kind of able to prove to myself that yes, there is a God. But Jesus, I was still a little unsure about that. And one of the things that New Age pushes a lot is the Course in Miracles. And so I was like, well, let me read this Course in Miracles, right? And so I was reading it, and if you've ever read it, or if you haven't, it's kind of like reading the Bible. It's in a different kind of verbiage. The language is hard to read. You have to really pay attention and try and figure it, like really, it's difficult. And so as much as I can grasp from it, and as much as I remember from it, it was all about love, right? And so that seems great. And that's kind of where and it talks about Jesus. And, but in my remembrance of it, it talks a lot about Jesus being like your brother. Like basically, he's like your big brother that you look up to and you try to emulate and be like, right? And so I was like, yeah, that makes sense, like I should try to emulate him. And but is he God? I still didn't necessarily believe that. And so it was a struggle, I was kind of still in it, but I felt like I needed to start going to church. And so I, at that point, I was going to church, and I went and talked with the pastor. But he just made me feel really bad about, my beliefs that I had. And like the fact that I was reading this Course in Miracles and I thought it was a great book and blah, blah, blah. And he was just like, well, it's not the Bible. Like nothing is true but the Bible. And I was just like, excuse you. And I think I like to, obviously I was polite and whatever, but like, I think to me, I got really defensive and upset that he said that to me. And so I was like, along with the other things going on, I was like, this is just not the place for me. And so I went to another church, and this is kind of where I had the revelation of Jesus is God. I and I just remember distinctly driving down this certain road, like this certain highway, and like realizing that like all of the truths of God. Like God is God and Jesus is God. And it's like, this is why all of these things, the Virgin Mary and like the water to wine and all of these things happened and are true because of God. And it was just like, you're not going to see it, right? So if you can't see it, you are likely not to believe it. But as soon as you believe it is true, it just opens your eyes and you can see everything. Like the scales fall off and like all of it is just so obvious. And it was this massive, like heart opening revelation for me. And so I gave my life to Jesus, and I was baptized in 2019. But I was still in that phase of the new age, right? Like I still was doing like the angel cards, the tarot cards. I was like into astrology because I was trying to find myself, right? I was trying to find my purpose. And I was so obsessed about it. And I was trying to figure anything out that I could, right? And so I'm, going to astrology and numerology, and I'm, looking at human design, and I'm looking at all of these things. And it was just like this, people, like I just kept seeing how, people were saying it's evil, it's evil. And it just bothered me. It really bothered me because I'm like, you have no idea what this has done for my life. Like I am restored because of all of these things. And I'm using these cards, but I'm using good energy, like I'm not using like evil energy to do these things. And all of these things, and I just didn't understand, but it was bothering me. And as I was asking God, had been asking him for, years for discernment, to sharpen my discernment, it started like really eating at me. Okay, I feel like maybe this is wrong, but I don't understand why. And I need to understand why, God. And so I just prayed and I was like, tell me, like, show me like what this is. Show me why. Because I can't accept that. I just think these people are judgmental and they don't know what they're talking about. I'm not going to listen to people that just, spout stuff, but they can't tell me why. And so I went to God. I went straight to God because, there's so many false prophets out there. You can't trust anybody. You can't, you have to really discern who to trust. And so I went to God and I was just like, show me, show me. And so finally, I had just happened to see something with a former Satanist, and I was starting to see a lot of content from, former witches and Satanists and things like that, like really diving into the spiritual realm. And basically, what God showed me is that, there is no good energy that you're pulling from, because we on earth, this is the dominion of Satan, right? Satan rules earth. And so we are surrounded by demons. We're not surrounded by angels. We're not, I mean, angels come down and, but like we're not surrounded by angels. We're not surrounded by our ancestors. We're not surrounded by spirit guides. In that sense, the spirit guides are these demons that are called familiars, and they go follow you through your life and through your family's life, and they know everything about you. They watch you, right? They're sitting there watching you, and they know everything. And so that's when I realized, like, I'm using these cards. I'm calling on, doesn't matter that my intention is necessarily good, you know, my spirit guides, it doesn't matter that it's good. What I'm pulling from is demonic. And so this is kind of where I want to go further into detail, because it really was so eye-opening. And because at the same time, it's like mediums, I used to watch Teresa, the Long Island medium. I used to watch her stuff all the time. I loved it. I cry every episode, like she helps so many people. And I just couldn't understand. I'm like, God, like she's Catholic. You gave her that gift. Like, how can that be evil? I just don't understand. And so that's the answer, right? It's like she is not a medium for your ancestors. Your ancestors are in heaven. They can't come down here. They don't have their heavenly bodies yet, right? Go to Revelation. Revelation, the dead will rise first, to get their heavenly bodies, and then everyone else. And so, well, that might not be Revelation. I can't remember where specifically that is, but you get my point, right? And so the our ancestors are not here. What she's being a medium for is a familiar, this demon that knows all about that person's life. And so, yes, they're helping that person heal, but in the sense of, let's say, it's kind of let's say somebody led a really evil and terrible life. Like they were a terrible, evil person. They didn't believe in Jesus. They didn't believe any of that stuff. They did horrible things. Well, now you're talking to this demon that's saying, hey, I'm in heaven. I'm safe. I'm happy. I'm comfortable. All of this stuff. And so now it's like, oh, well, they did these horrible things and they're okay. So I don't have to change my life, right? Do you see how that's not good? Like that's that's what Satan wants you to believe. He wants you to believe that you're safe, that no matter what you do, no matter what you believe, that you're safe. And so this is where that mediums are evil comes from. Yeah, I mean, you're not supposed to medium for spirits. Their gift that they gave them, their gift that God gave them, was the gift of prophecy, right? But they're utilizing it for a different purpose. So even though it's a God gift and they're not using it for God, it still works. It's still a God-given gift, but you're just using it for the wrong reasons. And this is the same, like psychics, they're talking to demons, and then you hear that future prediction, and you are coming into agreement that, yes, I agree that that's what's going to happen. And then, of course, so it does. And so that's why that's demonic, right? And then astrology, the self-help, the numerology, all of those things are demonic, because you are essentially taking God out of it, and you're putting yourself at the center, right? And you're creating an identity that is separate from God, and you're saying, yes, I agree that this is my identity, and it's anything that's taking God out of the picture is separation, right? And that's the ultimate. That's what Satan wants. He wants separation, that you can define yourself without God, that you can create an identity, that you can create a life, that you can create, anything, and you don't need God. You can do it for yourself. And that's where this self-help and this personal development really like toes a line here, because it's like, no, 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 like we have to, we should take everything to God, and God can help us, talk to us and can help us transmute that negativity and the all of the bad in our head and turn it to good and tell us what to do, right? And so yeah, I mean, it's the whole point is not necessarily to do evil, right? New Age isn't about evil, it's about separation. And so if Satan can separate you from God, then he's won. And so that's where this deception comes, and that's where this whole thing of New Age is evil, right? That's why it's evil. And so I think that we really have lost a lot of that knowledge. It's just been hidden, right? We don't understand all of the things, and so most people don't. You can't. Most people, I've asked, well, why? Why is it evil? Why? Nobody knows, because they say because it's in the Bible. Well, I need to know why. Like, tell me why. And so this is why. Now, the thing I will say, I've been in conflict with energy healing, but I think what that comes down to is, again, a separation, right? And so you're basically giving the credit to a person for healing you. Basically, someone has the God-given gift of healing, and they're using it to give credit to themselves or to give credit to source or the universe or some deity, that's not God. And so yeah, I think that's where that becomes not good. And then crystals, I always had an issue with crystals because, I mean, God made crystals, right? So how can crystals themselves be evil? And I think that's the point, is that crystals themselves are not evil. But I think when you place a value on them, right? So, or a meaning, right? And so, like, this crystal is for this, and that crystal is for that. I think that's where it gets, and this is opinion, because I don't feel like God has made this 100% clear to me yet. But this is kind of why I'm thinking that probably it's how you use them, right? So if you're using them in rituals and you're using them for a meaning, then yeah, it's, that's evil. But crystals themselves, I don't think are evil, because, I mean, of course, God made them. Um, so that's my take on that. But hopefully this helped you understand New Age, because for me, it just bothered me so badly that nobody had an answer. And I'm all about asking questions. I'm all about, like, understanding, and I want to know why. I'm that kid that's always asking why. So so I wanted to make that clear. If you have more questions or you have any insight, obviously, please drop it in the comments. I'd love to know your thoughts, your questions, anything else, your story. How did on how you came to Jesus, anything, let me know. And I will see you next week.